I could.
Welcome to Film Talk Weekly Radio. This is your guest host, Castle Searcy, with the Santa Fe International Film Festival. Today we're here with Peter Matsoukas with Rockscar Films. Peter, you're in Indiana right now?
I am. Yes.
Indianapolis, Indiana?
Yes, I am.
And
State
who's
capital.
state capital?
Yes.
And who's your friend to your left over there, licking their
Yeah,
paws?
this is Ripley,
Ripley.
in the grand tradition of film animals, named after Ellen Ripley, of course, from Alien. Yeah, he's my precious baby. He might join us for a little while.
Okay, great. Um, so everyone, Peter is an independent filmmaker, and you're based in Indiana. And tell me what else you do, because I know filmmaking is not your only job. As with many filmmakers, you wear a lot of hats. Teacher, tell me what
Yeah,
your current resume looks like.
sure, sure. Yeah, as an independent filmmaker, I'm constantly hustling to get projects made.
Right.
And also having to earn in other ways. So I'm a adjunct professor at Indiana University, Bloomington, and Indiana University, Indianapolis.
Both.
Um, yeah, so I teach some classes at some and some at the other. Um, and
You're
I work
teaching
on,
film.
yeah, I teach directing. Oh, it depends on the semester, but this semester I'm teaching directing the cinematic story in Bloomington and intro to film in Indianapolis, which is kind of cool because I'm dealing with juniors and seniors who are serious about making films in my directing course, and people who are really kind of new to learning about the medium as freshmen and sophomores in this other course. So I'm catching them in every way on their path to hopefully being filmmakers and film lovers. Um, and yeah, other than that, I do a lot of freelance work. I create documentaries, promos, freelance work, but hoping to, dwindle it down to making film projects and teaching, which is, I think, what I'm most passionate about.
Okay. And so tell me about some of the projects that are live right now that you're excited about that we can check out.
Sure. Well, I made a film called Beelines, the letter B, and then lines.
Okay.
It's I'd call it a horror noir film that's currently streaming on Tubi and lots of other AVOD platforms. It's a taut 75 minutes, some intersecting storylines, um, and lots of atmospheric dread and and some fun. I think it's a really interesting low budget film that I was happy to get distribution for. And then I have another film that actually premiered in 2020, June of 2020, the perfect time for films to hit the market. Uh,
Right.
that that film is called No Place, and that's a film that's also streaming on multiple platforms. So those two are kind of the ones that I have out there in the world with me as a director. And then I have two films that I produced that I'm hoping to get distribution for, like ASAP or imminently. Compression and The Depths, which are two really talented filmmakers, both horror films, and I think could do excellent work on streamers once they actually make it there. They just have to, work out some red tape or cut through some red tape, and then hopefully it'll get distributed. So those are kind of the big four.
Okay. So I want to get into later, like how you get distribution for these and how that works. So filmmakers listening can hear about, real life situations of getting your films like out there and distributed.
Yeah.
You can rent your films on Amazon, which is it seems like a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's true. It's once you have a distributor, it's out there, and a lot of your work is done, and you can hopefully it's out there for people to watch, and hopefully the huge paychecks come rolling in. But
Yes,
and not,
yes, that's the
it's
idea.
slow moving, but that's what happens in theory,
Yeah, that's the idea, like doing something you love and getting the giant paychecks.
and then putting that money back into the next film. Like that's
Yes,
that is
that
that's what you should
yeah,
be doing, hopefully.
that's the idea. So I Googled you, and Peter Matsoukas is a writer, producer, and director who typically works in the genres of drama, noir, and horror. So do you consider yourself like Does this sum you up? Are you a horror filmmaker or
Um,
thriller?
yeah, I sort of came to horror films late. In the mid 2000s, I got in with these horror filmmakers in New York and I started making behind the scenes documentaries for their films. And to hang out with these guys, I had to really watch a lot of horror movies and bone up on what I was missing out on. And then I learned that I really loved horror films. So I don't, it's not in my blood. I didn't grow up with horror films. So I'd say
Mhm.
I'm horror adjacent. Um,
Okay.
but I do love horror films, and I watch a ton of Shudder and horror stuff. But I sort of probably are more of like atmospheric noir thriller. I'm a New Yorker. I was born there, so it's more of like the fear of the city and like having that cityscape. That's sort of the it's sort of like a neurotic horror. So
Okay.
that's where I'm that's in my blood, I'd say.
Okay. Not gore and not
No, I mean, I so appreciate the like gore effects and practical effects. Like it's movie magic, and I love zombies and I love all that stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know if I could do justice making that kind of film. It's mostly just bad people sort of in the darkness.
I like
So
neurotic horror as a genre. I think that's a new genre, right?
yes,
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 I think so.
yes.
I'm really too scared to watch scary movies. Like I've worked on at least one horror film festival, the Stanley Film Festival, when it first launched at the
Hmm.
Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, and really I was just too scared to watch the movies, but I still worked on it. So yeah.
I think as an independent filmmaker, I gravitate toward horror films because there's always a market for them. So
Hmm.
it's easier to make a horror film that's good and to get distribution, while comedy is a lot more difficult, or romance. I'm not that I'm saying that one should shy away from those things. So
Hmm.
people should make the films that they want to make, but there's always a market for horror films. And if you're sort of hustling and sort of trying to get projects made and make inroads and make projects, it's not a bad place to be.
Hmm.
And you meet a lot of cool people who are in it for the love of film. So I think that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, tell me how you fell into these horror filmmakers in New York.
Yeah, well, after I graduated from college, undergrad. I was working in production in New York, and then I met this one guy named Douglas Buck, who's a really interesting filmmaker. Has made a lot of horror films, and then he was going to be making a film called Sisters, which is a remake of a Brian De Palma film, and he was going to be making that in it was supposed to be New Orleans, but then it turned out to be Vancouver. He was hiring for someone to be his assistant. So I'm like, that sounds cool. I don't really have that much going on right now. I'd love to work on this with you and be your assistant. So I kind of worked with him for a couple of years as an unpaid intern, and I would, meet people, and he kind of introduced me to this whole crowd. So I worked on Sisters. I made the behind the scenes documentary, which was a great foray into filmmaking because I can be on set, I could interview actors, directors, but still make my own film and have no responsibility. Like I was kind of my own boss,
Hmm.
which is what I liked. So I just learned a lot, and it also demystified the process a lot. I could see how real, like not a list, but like big time actors and directors were interacting and talking, and it didn't seem that foreign to me anymore. I'm like, I could do that. I have the chops to do that. So
Hmm.
did that a few more times, and then so that's kind of how I fell into that. But with some cool filmmakers in New York like Larry Fessenden and Douglas Buck, Glenn McQuaid, like these are like sort of independent horror filmmakers.
We're here with Peter Matsoukas, independent filmmaker from Indianapolis, Indiana, right? Where are you originally from, though? New York, you said. Yeah.
Yes, originally
Okay.
originally, originally from New York. Yeah, and I've been in Indy for I guess 11 years now. Wasn't
Okay.
my plan starting out, but yeah, I was in Chicago for a few years where I went to grad school. I got married, started, Indianapolis was more of an affordable place. My wife grew up here, so
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's really cool that someone like you is you're following your dream. You might not be in Hollywood, you might not be in New York, and somehow in Indiana you're still producing films, directing, working in film, teaching, you're still doing it. So, like, is this what you always wanted to do? Take us back to young Peter in New York. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah. When I realized I couldn't hit a curveball and I couldn't play baseball, uh, I'm like, okay, I better have a fallback position. But I didn't really know I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I don't know. I went to college. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a big school, and I just kind of fell into taking film courses, and I really was intrigued by the history of film. And I've always loved film, but never saw it as something as a viable, um, thing for me to do. My parents were both lawyers, so they were always trying to push me to do that.
That
I
was
wasn't.
my next question is like, what does your parents want you to be? And like,
Yeah, but they were cool. They kept nudging me, but I wasn't going to stick. So after I graduated, I'm like, I really love film. I was making films in college. I started working in production, but also balancing, I would temp. I was working as a consultant, doing IT type stuff. Um, but then I really started making films and seeing how people were living. And then I went to grad school in 2009 in Chicago at DePaul University. And that was the first time I started thinking about maybe wanting to teach. I never thought about that. My wife
grad
actually.
school for film or
Yeah, yeah. It was,
okay.
yeah, digital cinema.
Okay.
And yeah, and then I guess just being a grad student, like being a student again, got me thinking about, well, maybe I could teach. Again, my wife was really pushing me to do that because she thought I could do it before I thought I could do it. And then yeah, I've been working in academia. I've worked at universities as a staff member, and that was my type job, which would allow me to make films and give me access to equipment and editing software.
Oh yeah.
So I was at DePaul. I was at this university called Marion, which is in Indianapolis, and then I started adjuncting. So that's how I got to balance being a professor and being a filmmaker. And then I sort of quit my job type job so that my filmmaking kind of is my job type job along with teaching. So, but yeah, so it certainly wasn't my plan to be in Indianapolis. Not necessarily my plan to be here the rest of my life, but it is for what it is for now. And yeah, I mean, you go where you have to keep, if you love making films, you have to keep making them wherever you are. And
You'll find a way to do it. Yeah.
you seek the community, and exactly. And that's what I've done. And there really is not a lot of stuff in Indianapolis or Indiana because we don't have tax incentives. But we're hoping to pass them, or not we, but because I could never think of it as a
The
we.
royal we.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think that, but all the adjacent states to Indiana, like Kentucky and Ohio, they have huge incentives. There's incredible production being done in Louisville, Kentucky right now. Gus Van
Really?
Sant is shooting a film. Yeah. Ethan Hawke was making a film. So these things are popping up in cities. So in Midwestern cities that aren't typically hotbeds for film. So
Then you're close to Illinois, Michigan. So do you work in those areas as well?
a little bit. I've done some work up in northern Indiana and South Bend area,
Hmm.
um, and Chicago. Yeah, I mean it's all pretty close, 2 hours to 3 hours. And Wisconsin. We're going to get to that, I think, a little bit later. But shooting a documentary up in Wisconsin um, of a rock musician, troubadour, Pat McCurdy. Done some film work up in Wisconsin, and hoping to do a lot more this year. So yeah, I'll always have. I mean, I guess I'm a New Yorker, but I've lived in the Midwest for a fair amount now. So hopefully, I've retained the good attributes of being a New Yorker and added the good attributes of being a Midwesterner, and none of the bad ones of either. So
I think so. You're
there
really
are a lot.
nice. You give off New York, East Coast vibes, but you're really nice, which I think New Yorkers actually are the nicest people.
Hmm.
But you're got some, what is it, Midwest nice or Iowa nice, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think so. I don't
yeah.
know. I try to be nice, or maybe I'm just a good actor. Maybe I should get into acting. No,
Maybe. Have you ever acted?
no, no, no. Only in bad student movies, and yeah, not really.
Okay. I think you
I,
you could maybe act as a lawyer and then your parents would be
I almost got killed in my last film. I was just a guy
okay.
on the computer, but that wasn't really. I was just actually like on my computer. But that's the next one. Law and Order, Indianapolis.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. So the way we actually know each other through a friend who is an actor. Benny Kaplan, and you went to school with Benny Kaplan in Madison. Yeah,
Yes.
and I think we could talk about that project now.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is how Pete and I know each other. Peter and I know each other. I was calling you Pete for short because we're in
You
the
can call me Pete. It's fine.
throes of filmmaking, right? So I invited myself to work on your film and be your assistant for, an intern. And tell us about the project, though. We're going to
Well,
definitely have more episodes about the project as it comes to fruition, but give us a sneak peek.
yeah, this was super excited about this project. And Castle, you were so great to work on it with us. And yeah, it's about this guy, Pat McCurdy, who's kind of the most well-traveled and busiest guy in Wisconsin show business. At his heyday or at his peak, he was doing 350 shows a year, traveling around Wisconsin, playing bars, state fairs, mostly bars in Chicago, Milwaukee, all over Wisconsin, Madison, obviously, where me and Benny saw him back in the 90s. And he's written over 900 songs. He plays lots of like fun, irreverent, um, just great rock songs. Him with a guitar, lots of humor, lots of crowd interaction, singing about the things that any Wisconsin person or person of with a heartbeat would
Right?
enjoy.
Human, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's just so much fun, and honestly, no one's ever done a doc on him. So me and Benny, we started talking about it, and he and I reconnected after many years, not really talking, just for whatever reason we sort of drifted apart. But this project has brought us back together too, and that's been really fantastic. But so yeah, we've been shooting and hope to shoot more in 2025, and then I think get it out in 2026. So
So this was, you went to see Pat McCurdy when you went to school in Michigan or
Wisconsin, yeah,
Wisconsin.
yep.
Um, and you would like see him regularly and you're like super fans. There's a group of you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Every Tuesday at Regent Street Retreat in Madison, we would go. I probably went maybe like 10 to 15 times in college, but I
Uh-huh.
think Benny and others went more, and then they kept seeing him, and Benny had him, play his rehearsal dinner at his wedding, and we would go back and schedule our reunions around Pat McCurdy shows. So yeah, it's certainly something that he's been with us for a long time.
Yeah. So like, how do you go from like super fan to filmmaker to making a film about this person? Like, how does that process go down?
Well, Benny has done, he knew these guys. I brought some credibility because I'm a filmmaker, and I just made a documentary that played on PBS in 2024. And that was really my first like proper documentary.
Which one is that?
It's called The Diary of Henry J. McBride,
Right. Okay.
about a Civil War diary and the many lives it's touched over
Yes.
160 years. Which is not at all what I usually do, but it was sort of an educational doc. Um, and yeah, we just pitched him this idea about making this documentary about Pat, and he was a little reticent about doing it. Why, do they really want to see a documentary about me? And we're like, yes, and it's not just Pat, it's his music, and we want to kind of bring that to the masses. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm a super fan. After spending 3 days with you guys and going to three shows, like I could not get those songs out of my head in a good way. But they were like playing on background in my mind while I was doing and thinking other things. It was wild. Like they definitely take a hold of you. And it was really cool to see his interactions with his fans and like the community he's built around, like his team and his fans who have become friends and they follow him everywhere. And it was just really cool.
Oh, it's pretty special.
In our last segment, we were talking a little bit about documentaries and like how there's the structure or there could be and there's rules. Like, can you talk a little bit about that and like I know there's like certain ways to make documentaries, right? There's kitchen sink and then there's you go in with a story. Like what are like some of the rules that people follow or some models maybe
Yeah.
that
I started off making narrative films like way before documentary. So, and I've only became like really into documentary because of behind the scenes things I used to work on. But I've always tried to be objective. I think filmmakers need to be objective when tackling a subject or a person to profile. But film is all film is a manipulation. Even the most objective documentary is sort of giving the filmmaker's perspective. So I think as we get more media savvy, media literate as a documentary consuming society, and we're consuming so many docs nowadays, like on Netflix. Like Netflix has their rhythm going, like they have their 3 episode, true crime doc, or Max or whatever streamers. I think people understand that. But the form is really expanding. I think people can do a lot more and explore. Like there's more room for experimentation. And that's why I think the Pat McCurdy doc is a good conduit for that kind of exploration and experimentation, but hopefully staying within the framework of what people like and know. So yeah, I mean the Pat doc, we've got lots of interviews and talking heads, but I think B-roll and maybe how we intertwine a lot of the concert footage with and like a lot of the sound mixing we can do with his recordings, and there's a lot of things to explore there. But I think all filmmakers who make documentaries have to be objective, know the story they want to tell.
Do you think you have to know the story before you go in for sure?
I think
Hmm.
there absolutely are ways to find the story. Like I mean, I know there have been tons of documentaries that started one way and then totally veered a different way. I mean, who knows? Pat McCurdy's doc could veer a different way too. So I think you have to be open-minded until the
Right.
thing is actually finished.
Because it is kind of like investigating. I mean, you're exploring along. If you were, I mean, I guess you could be documenting something you already know about, but I think most of the time it's a discovery process, right? Like
I
you,
think that it's going to be a lot of killing your darlings to actually whittle this thing down, because I think there's going to be tons of it, and I've
right.
never made a documentary on this scale. But I'll tell you that the film I made that was on PBS initially was supposed to be an hour-long documentary,
Hmm.
and I watched it with my DP, and he's like, Peter, this is good, but this should be a half hour. And I'm like,
Hmm.
really? That wasn't my. But he's like, no, look at it again, and I realized that there was so much of it that I could trim that really was sort of tangential to what I really wanted to get across, and that it was a much more effective piece as a 26:46 as opposed to 56 fit, whatever the how it works for PBS. So it's not that hard for me to do. I don't grow totally attached to things, um, but I think once you watch with other people, you when you watch something with other people, you see things through their eyes as opposed to editing in a bubble. A lot of filmmakers talk. I think Steven Spielberg talks about the movie Jaws and about the shark and how hard he worked to try to get the shark to work. And in the edit, Verna Fields, who was the editor, kept wanting to cut the shark down. But he's like, how can I cut this shark down? We put so much time into this shark.
Right.
Um,
It's like
but in the
sunk cost fallacy, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the end run, the audience doesn't care how much time the director and this team put into this animatronic shark.
Right.
It's like, what is it going to be scary? So that is maybe the quintessential, the Captain Quint essential, killing your darling. Um, but I don't know. I mean, you get to leave a lot of stuff on the editing room floor, and I'd say that most films in their original cut, whether it be narrative or documentary, are the best cut. The director's cut, when they add 20 minutes, when they put the scene back,
Hmm.
nonsense that George Lucas has done with his films, Star Wars films, they're not as good because, the first cut is usually the most streamlined cut. At least
Yeah.
that's concerned.
And so are you an editor as well, or you have someone else involved?
I I wish I could have someone else. But I do edit my own films.
Okay.
At this point, I'd love to pass it on to someone to do. Um, yes, I do edit all my films, or I have at this point, except for a couple shorts I had an editor. But I could never shoot. I'm not a shooter. I'm not a cinematographer. Even though I was shooting on the Pat McCurdy doc, that's not
Mhm.
really my bag. But I'm more of an editor. So a professional, like any narrative film, I'll always have a DP, and I usually
Mhm.
don't touch a camera. But for Pat McCurdy, I was
But
like,
you're capable of it, obviously. Yeah.
well, I hadn't shot like a really good camera like that in a long time. So I was like, "Ew," but yeah, I got into it. I was speaking for a while. So that first day was a little hairy when I was like trying to get the lens in there. But once after a while, I was doing whip pans. It was fun. So I
Yeah.
was in.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about, so Beelines, No Place, No Place.
No Place.
Those are
Yes.
both available streaming on Tubi and Amazon. Those
Yeah.
are feature films.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Nope. Again, No Place was a couple years ago. Um, yeah, that is more of a film noir. It's like a guy is a grifter is going through Indianapolis, and we don't really know why, but there's a woman there who keeps drawing him back, and he's made lots of enemies along the way, and bad things happen. He has to sort of figure out how to get out of Indianapolis. Um, so that's No Place, and then
I like grifter movies.
me too. Yeah,
Grifters, yeah.
yeah.
Good,
He
good
pulls
topic.
scams. He does card
Yeah,
scams. He's
yeah,
a school hustler,
yeah.
um, like a manipulator. Smokes a lot of cigarettes. I don't know. That's not part of it. But
Yeah.
Benjamin Madrid is an awesome actor. He's in that. He's a comedian, so he's also this guy's also a stand-up comedian in the film. So there's a lot of playing to his strengths as an actor, Ben Madrid. And then, but No Place is more of a that's more of a straight story with a restricted narration, like one protagonist, while Beelines is three intersecting storylines.
Okay.
Um, and basically, a woman is being stalked, and she has to flee to the safe house, but the safe house might not be so safe, and that's what we learn. And
Are
a
you
lot
are
of,
you writing these movies too?
yeah.
They're so dark and you seem so pleasant.
Well, it's got to come out somewhere
Right.
somehow.
This is the neurotic, what is it? Neurotic horror. Yeah. This is like
Yeah.
the fears of New York childhood.
Well, yes. Well, there's always in New York. I mean, it's pretty safe growing up there. Once late '80s, early '90s, but there's always dark and dangerous potential. Like there's
Yeah.
always that feel. But I never lived in a house, but we have a house that we had access to, so I have fears of that. I always had apartments and buffer
I
zones.
can't live in a house. I can't. Like,
Yeah.
I
So
don't, have we talked about this?
I
I
think
don't
we
like
talked about it briefly.
multiple entrances. I just like
Yeah.
one door. I
Yeah.
don't want multiple, because I did live in houses as a kid and it wasn't good. Yeah.
Yeah. You did tell me this. Yes.
Yeah. I like to be on a high floor, bars on the window. My sister's the same way.
I had a fear as a kid because I was in a loft, but then there was like all this drug dealing in the back alley, and there was always sirens and stuff. And I always had fear of being, I don't know if it's getting too dark, being shot through the window.
Yeah.
But it never happened. But I moved to a different place, and a bullet actually went through the window of the apartment above mine.
See?
So, so
Not irrational.
was I being paranoid, or was I just lucky or unlucky? So I don't know. The crazy things happen, but
I mean, in my last apartment, like at one point there was like a shooting outside and it wasn't like a bad neighborhood, but there was. And I like dropped to the floor. Like, like it was
you're
like
smart.
yeah, it was like a movie, but I mean, it didn't come inside the apartment, but when it's that close and clear, you're like, you act like you're in a movie basically and you
This has
drop to
gotten
the,
dark. It's gotten
yeah.
dark.
I think that how movies help, like that could
Yeah.
be like a drive-by and you should drop to the floor.
Well, I think that we all have fears,
Yeah,
horror films, or even like we think about podcasts. Like people are addicted to Crime Pod because it makes those fears palatable and at a safe
yeah.
distance
I'm
and
not
manageable.
addicted to them.
What's that?
I'm not addicted to
You're
them.
not
I'm
addicted. I,
scared.
I, I've gotten into them, but I feel like I need to stop because I've just been
I don't
listening.
need any more content in here, but
I
I know
agree.
people like it. I just stayed with some people who watch them nonstop. They love them.
Yeah,
They just go to sleep to them.
that's not good.
Not good. Yeah, but that's their
Infiltrate my
thing.
dreams. That would
Yeah,
infiltrate
yeah.
my
So I think what I'm looking for is for you to demystify, as you said, the distribution process and how do you go from making a film and actually getting it streamed? I think a lot of people don't know how that works or how to do it.
Sure. Well, I think that the in your mind you make a film, maybe it goes to festivals, and then distributors are knocking down your door to distribute your film, and that certainly happens with some films at some big festivals. But oftentimes you're reaching out to distributors, you're networking, you're making inroads. The distributor of No Place, I knew of somebody who knew of somebody, so I was able to get them a screener, and then they liked the film, and that was during COVID, so there were no film festivals, or at least film festivals were becoming virtual. So we just signed up right there process. But you just have to be savvy. You have to network. You have to put yourself out there. Um, Jacob Belinsky, who directed the film Compression, did an incredible sort of press kit that he was able to send to distributors, like one shot with incredible artwork and all the festivals it's played with links that were workable. Like that's a nice presentation, a nice package. Um, Pull quotes of people who watch your films is always a good thing to put out there. But for the most part, good films will speak for themselves. Have somebody who wants your film, who will really put it out there. And then once you sign with somebody, you want somebody who will communicate with you and tell you
Mhm.
and sort of keep you, because that the distributor is creating artwork for you. They might be creating trailers for you, but they're also spending money out for your film that they're going to have to recoup before you can see anything. So hopefully you can keep that money low. And more distributors now are cognizant of keeping those costs low because it makes them more desirable for filmmakers. If there's a cap at how much they can spend without pushing that limit up, that's more desirable for someone who's made a low budget film to possibly
So
see
do they
some.
take a percentage out of your sales,
Yes.
or you're not paying them up front?
No, no,
Okay.
no. So oftentimes they're paying you
Okay.
like a small chunk, but yes, they're having to recoup what they've put into the film. But once they've recouped that, then there's a percentage, and it varies. But hopefully, you're both making a percentage, um, depending on the platform.
So the way you've met distributors, you've done like cold emails, but it's best to go find them in person through festivals or
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think the more filmmakers you we've had a lot of people who have introduced us through emails, like who have
Hmm.
had distribution.
Hmm.
Um, like I've worked with this person and they putting me and that person together. You
Hmm.
like my film, so you might like Peter's film or Jacob's film. So it's a lot of networking. A lot of it's over email, but so, through the industry. But if you go to festivals, especially genre festivals, again, some of these are horror films. So we've met a lot of horror distributors at these festivals.
Right.
So so yeah, it's a hustle. I mean, none of
Yeah.
them are in Indiana. So I mean, I'm
Right.
clearly
I know.
reaching out.
I mean, it's really cool. Like you're making all this happen from a place that's not typically
Yeah,
thought of for film, so you can
totally.
do it anywhere. I feel like that's our lesson with Peter today.
That is a takeaway for sure.
Yeah, if you want to do this, you can make it happen from anywhere. What other
Hey,
advice do you have for aspiring filmmakers out there?
um, my biggest thing is connect with like-minded people. You're not alone as a filmmaker. Like I think that for a long time I was just sort of solo, and ironically I was in New York in a place where there were a zillion filmmakers, and that's where I
Mhm.
was my most lonely and sort of solo minded. It only takes you to write a film, and you need to have the discipline to get these ideas out, but you need to partner with people to make these films happen. You need to have people on your side. You need to have an actor who you're working with or an actress. You need to have a cinematographer. You need to have infrastructure.
Mhm.
Um, and once you have trusted infrastructure in place, then you can make anything really, and it doesn't matter the budget. You can hustle and find things, and um, but it's like you have to sort of put that together, and it does take time. But going to film festivals and networking, even if you volunteer at a festival,
Mhm.
it's a great networking opportunity. Um, and I just feel like you have to, wherever you are, you have to meet like-minded people. But there is no clear-cut way to make it as a filmmaker. That is, some people go to film school, some people just work in the industry. But it's also not something where you start as a PA and then you become a director. That's just not. You could be, but directors have to direct their own films. They have to write and make films. That's the only way to
Mhm.
get better as a filmmaker, as a writer, as a storyteller. So that's my biggest advice. Keep making projects as small as they are. Sean Baker made 2015 Tangerine using iPhones, and not a lot of non-actors. And then 10 years later,
Right.
he makes Noir. So, and those films are very similar thematically. So, in the same beats. So keep making projects.
Yeah, and relationships. That comes back a lot on this show. It's like relationships and keeping, like don't be a jerk and
Yeah.
and keep in contact with people and be someone that people want to work with, right?
No doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
and honestly, even if you're young and starting out, getting on film crews and establishing yourself as a professional that people want to work with, someone who's responsible, who will show up and put in the work, that really says a lot about you. So
Okay, we only have a couple minutes left. Why don't you tell us about the depths and compression a little bit? And you're searching for distribution right now, or you're in talks, right?
yes, definitely in
Right.
talks. Both of them are. I'm really into both of them. I produced both. I co-wrote Compression. Um, yeah, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to jinx
Hmm.
it, but
Okay.
hopefully they'll get out.
Well, what are they about?
Um, the depths about astral projection.
Whoa.
It's a
What?
found footage film that has astral projection. And it's kind of a crazy premise, but it's just a wild film in a good way. Nothing like you've ever seen. And then Compression is about an agoraphobic podcaster who is dealing with some trauma, and she's a true crime podcaster, and she might be getting stalked by one of the cases that she's investigating. But lots
That
of
sounds
crazy things happen.
interesting.
Yeah, and that film has done very well in the festival circuit, and
Yeah,
it's
I bet.
a
And
great
it
film.
sounds like it could actually happen to someone.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, so those are the two that hopefully will get distribution soon, and there'll be more good things coming from Rockstar Films.
And then you're working on Pat McCurdy and you're working on something else, right?
Yes, yes. Another narrative film called Fire Pit, which is a more of a drama. There's some darker elements, but it's a drama, and may or may not have cast Benny Kaplan in a role today. Actually,
Whoa.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's going to be shooting in the summer, a couple weeks in the summer. But I'm excited about that too. Fire
Cool.
Pit coming in
Fire pit.
2026, hopefully. Yeah.
All right. Peter Matsoukas, Rockscar Films. Instagram is at Rockscar Films.
Yes, there's an underscore in
Yeah.
there, I think. Yeah, at rockscar underscore film.
Underscore film. And then rockscarfilms.com.
Yeah, I think Rockscar. Yeah, rockscarfilms.com. You can get everything there. Linking to
It's all there.
Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all there. One stop shop.
Cool. Thanks for joining us. And as you get further along with the Pat McCurdy documentary and your other film, Fire Pit, come back and talk to us.
Anytime. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Castle.
Cool. Thank you. This has been Film Talk Weekly Radio with Castle from the Santa Fe International Film Festival. And we've been talking with Peter Matsoukas with Rockscar Films.